Oh my God, someone call 911. It's that stalker fan again. She followed me here. My sister Ashley's voice shrieked across the room, shattering the hum of expensive conversation. She stood in the center of my living room, clutching a glass of my $3,500 vintage whiskey, pointing a trembling manicured finger right at my face. Outside, the autumn storm hammered relentlessly against the glass walls of the lake house I had built to escape this exact kind of noise. Inside, 20 strangers turned to look at me, the dripping wet woman in the doorway with eyes full of fear and judgment. I stood, frozen water pooling around my boots, watching my own sister tell her wealthy in-laws that I was a deranged intruder in the home I paid for. If your sibling called the cops on you in your own house, what would you do? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I need to know I'm not the only one who thinks this is insane. I stood there, the cold rain still dripping from my coat onto the polished concrete floor, and I didn't say a word, I just watched. In my line of work, you learn that silence is often louder than shouting. My name is Jessica, and I am a tech CFO. My entire life is built on precision logic and the bottom line. I don't deal in drama. I deal in hard data. And the data concerning my family had been in the red for a decade. To understand why I was standing there soaking wet watching my sister perform this bizarre theater, you have to understand the invisible contract that governed our lives. It was a simple agreement, never written down but signed in blood. I pay and they exist. For 10 years I had been the wallet, the safety net. I paid the $3,000 monthly rent on Ashley's trendy downtown condo because she needed the right address to build her influencer brand. I paid the lease on her Range Rover because appearances are assets. I transferred a monthly stipend into her account that was more than most people earned working 40 hours a week, simply because I had been trained to believe it was my duty. I had fallen into the trap of normalizing cruelty. It is a subtle, insidious mechanism that rewires your brain. You don't wake up one day and decide to let someone use you. It happens by degrees. You are taught that your value lies in your utility. You are taught that keeping the peace is a noble sacrifice rather than a form of self-abandonment. I had normalized their entitlement to the point where it felt like love. I told myself that if I just wrote enough checks, if I solved enough problems, I would eventually earn my place as a sister rather than a resource. I was the capable one, the strong one, the one who didn't need anything, so I gave everything. But everyone has a breaking point. For me, it was this house. This modern glass lake house was my sanctuary. It was the one thing I hadn't shared. It was a cold, clean, silent space where I could escape the noise of my career and the endless demands of my family. It was the only boundary I had ever set. I had told Ashley explicitly and clearly, this place is off limits. Do not ask for the key. Do not go there. And yet here she was. Not just trespassing but rewriting reality. She wasn't just using my house. She was claiming it. I looked past her to the older couple sitting on my Italian leather sofa, Robert and Susan, her husband Tyler's parents. They looked terrified, clutching their chests, believing they were in the presence of a dangerous stalker. Ashley had not just borrowed the house, she had sold them a lie so big she had to criminalize me to keep it alive. I looked at the whiskey bottle on the table. It was part of a collection I had been building for 5 years. She had opened it like it was cheap mixer. The trap of normalizing cruelty relies on the victim's silence. It relies on the belief that you will endure the disrespect to avoid the scene. Ashley was banking on the fact that I would be too embarrassed, too polite, or too sensible to ruin her party. She was banking on the old Jessica. But the woman standing in the doorway wasn't the old Jessica. The rain had washed her away. "Ma'am, step away from the guests," the first officer commanded, his hand resting near his belt. He was young, tense, and clearly responding to a distress call about a dangerous intruder. I didn't step back. I stepped forward into the light. "Officer, I am not the intruder. I am the owner." Ashley let out a theatrical gasp. "She's lying. She's obsessed with me. She's been stalking my social media for months." She turned to Robert and Susan, her eyes wide with manufactured terror. "I told you about her, didn't I? The woman who thinks she's my sister." Robert, a man who wore his wealth like armor, stood up, shielding his wife. "Young lady," he boomed at me, his voice shaking with indignation, "this is private property. Ashley and Tyler bought this estate 3 months ago. We saw the photos. We celebrated the closing. Now leave before you're arrested." Tyler, Ashley's husband, was huddled in the corner staring at his shoes. He knew. Of course he knew. He was the one who drove the car I leased. He was the one who lived in the condo I rented. But he was weak, a man who had traded his spine for a comfortable life funded by his sister-in-law. He wouldn't speak. 3 months ago, I repeated, my voice calm, almost bored. That's interesting. Because I closed on this property 18 months ago. Liar, Ashley shrieked. Officer, arrest her. She's ruining my housewarming party. The second officer, older and more weary, stepped between us. Okay, let's lower the volume. Ma'am, he addressed me, do you have identification? I have better than that, I said. I lifted my waterproof briefcase onto the kitchen island, the island made of imported Italian marble that I had selected myself. I clicked the latches open. The sound was sharp and final in the silent room. Inside, protected from the rain, were the documents I always carried when traveling to the property. The deed. The recent property tax receipt. My driver's license. Here's the deed, I said, handing the thick document to the older officer. Recorded in the county registry. Here is my ID, Jessica Reynolds. And here I pointed to the bottom line of the deed is the owner's name. The officer shone his flashlight onto the paper. The beam cut through the dim ambient lighting of the party, illuminating the black ink. He looked at the paper. He looked at my ID. He looked at the paper again. Then he turned the flashlight beam onto Ashley. She flinched as the light hit her face, her perfect makeup suddenly looking garish and mask-like. Ma'am, the officer said, his voice dropping the polite deference he had shown her earlier. This isn't your house. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. The air left the room. Robert and Susan stared at Ashley, their mouths slightly open. The guests, strangers who had been drinking my wine and eating my food, began to shift uncomfortably, sensing the sudden violent shift in power. He's wrong, Ashley stammered, her voice thin and reedy. It's a mistake. The paperwork hasn't gone through yet. Jessica, tell them you're just holding it for me. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was desperate, cornered, and pathetic, but she wasn't sorry. She was just sorry her performance was failing. Officer, I said, my voice ice cold. I would like these trespassers removed from my property. Immediately. The room didn't explode into chaos. It imploded into a suffocating stillness. The officer nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in command. All right, folks, party's over. You need to clear out, now. But it's raining, Ashley wailed, the facade of the elegant hostess crumbling into the tantrum of a spoiled child. That's not my problem, I said. Just like paying for this house wasn't your problem. She's just jealous, Ashley screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at me, her face twisted and ugly. She's always been jealous of me, because I have a life, and she just has money. She's trying to control me. Control you, I repeated. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed bright in the dim room. You're right, Ashley. I have been controlling you. I've been controlling the roof over your head. The car you drive. The clothes on your back. But you know what? I'm tired of being in control. I unlocked my banking app. Face ID recognized me instantly. What are you doing? Tyler asked, his voice trembling. I'm balancing the books, I said. I looked at the screen, narrating my actions with the detached precision of a surgeon. Here is the standing order for the lease on your downtown condo. $3,000 a month. Cancelled. I tapped the screen. Here's the auto payment for the Range Rover you drove here. The one registered in my name because your credit score is non-existent. Cancelled. I'll notify the leasing company for repossession in the morning. No, Ashley lunged forward, but the younger officer stepped in her path. You can't do that. That's my car. That's my apartment. And here, I continued, ignoring her, is the monthly transfer. The stipend I gave you so you could build your brand. $4,000 every month for 5 years. I looked up at her, my thumb hovering over the button. Deleted. It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon, the delusion of power of the empty wallet. Ashley truly believed her status was intrinsic. She believed she deserved the lifestyle because she was special, not because I was paying for it. She thought the money was just a detail, a background feature of her existence. But as I tapped that screen, I saw the realization hit her eyes. Without my money, she wasn't an influencer. She wasn't a homeowner. She wasn't even a solvent adult. She was a hollow shell, polished to a shine by my labor, and I had just turned off the lights. You're ruining my life, she screamed, the sound raw and guttural. I'm not ruining your life, Ashley, I said, putting my phone back in my pocket. Robert and Susan were staring at their daughter-in-law with a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. The lie had been total. The wealthy lifestyle, the successful husband, the property ownership, it was all a mirage funded by the dripping wet woman standing by the door. Tyler, his father said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Is this true? Have you been living off her charity this whole time? Tyler didn't answer. He just put his head in his hands. Get out, I said, all of you. The exodus was pathetic. The officers herded the guests out the front door into the teeth of the storm. There were no valet parkers here, just mud, rain, and the cold reality of a remote location with zero cell service for Uber. I watched from the living room window, a glass of my own whiskey finally in my hand. The expensive cars were getting bogged down in the soft earth of the unpaved overflow parking. Expensive heels were sinking into the mud. The perfectly coiffed hair was plastered to skulls. Robert and Susan were the last to leave the porch. I saw Robert stop and say something to Tyler. He was pointing a finger in his son's face, his expression thunderous. Tyler looked like a man who wished the earth would swallow him whole. Susan was crying, clutching her fur coat around her as if it could protect her from the shame. Ashley was trying to get into the passenger seat of the Range Rover, but Tyler locked the doors. I saw him shouting at her through the glass. She pounded on the window, screaming into the wind. Finally, he unlocked it, and she scrambled inside, soaking wet and shivering. They drove away in a convoy of defeat, red taillights fading into the rainy darkness. I turned back to the room. It was a mess. Muddy footprints on the marble, wet rings on the wood. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation, but as the last car disappeared down the driveway, the silence returned. My silence. It wasn't a triumphant feeling. There was no fist-pumping joy. It felt like the moment a migraine finally breaks the sudden jarring absence of pain that leaves you feeling hollowed out and exhausted. I had detonated my family. I had humiliated my sister. I had likely ended her marriage. I sat down on the sofa where my parents' photo used to be before Ashley replaced it with a picture of herself and took a sip of the whiskey. It burned clean and sharp. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't wondering if Ashley had enough money for rent. I wasn't worrying if Tyler's business was failing again. The headache was gone. 3 days later, I was back in the city, sitting in my corner office on the 42nd floor. The view was spectacular, a sprawling grid of steel and glass, but my focus was entirely on the man sitting across from me. It was Tyler. He looked terrible. Unshaved eyes, bloodshot, wearing a wrinkled shirt that had seen better days. He had called my assistant 14 times before I agreed to give him 5 minutes. I'm filing for divorce, he said, his voice flat. I assumed, I replied, not looking up from my laptop. Is that what you came here to tell me? Because I have a board meeting in 10 minutes. No, he said. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a stack of crumpled papers. He slid them across the mahogany desk. I came to show you this. I picked up the papers. They were loan documents, personal loans, credit lines, promissory notes from his parents, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Ashley told my parents we needed capital for my startup, Tyler said, staring at the wall. She showed them bank statements to prove we had the assets to back the loans. I flipped through the pages. My eyes narrowed. These bank statements. These show the monthly transfers I sent her. She forged them, Tyler said. She edited the PDFs. She changed the source from Jessica Reynolds to Reynolds Consulting LLC, a company that doesn't exist. She told my parents it was my consulting income. She used your money to prove I was successful so she could borrow more money from them. The air in the office went cold. This wasn't just mooching. This wasn't just entitlement. This was fraud, criminal fraud. Ashley hadn't just used me as a safety net. She had used me as bait. She told me she was handling the finances, Tyler whispered. I didn't know she was faking the documents. You knew you weren't earning that money, I said sharply. You knew you were living a lie. You just didn't know how deep the lie went. She ruined us, he said. My parents, they're suing me. They want the money back. I don't have it. Ashley spent it all. Clothes, trips, that stupid party. It's all gone. I handed the papers back to him. That sounds like a legal problem, Tyler, not a family problem. She's going to go to jail, he said, looking at me with pleading eyes. If my parents press charges, if you confirm the money wasn't income. I'm not confirming anything, I said, standing up. Because I'm not involved. I stopped being involved 3 days ago. He left a broken man walking out to face a storm of his own making. My phone buzzed. It was Ashley. Again. I had 37 unread messages from her. You ruined my life. How could you do this to your own sister? Tyler is leaving me. I have nowhere to go. Please, Jess. Please answer. I'm scared. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just call me. I looked at the messages. I thought about the forged documents. I thought about the stalker accusation. I thought about the years of loans that were never repaid. I selected all messages. Delete. 6 months later. The snow had melted from the mountains feeding the lake until it was a brilliant mirror glass blue. The air smelled of wet earth and pine needles. I was on my knees in the dirt, my hands gloved pressing a hydrangea root ball into the soil. I had never gardened before. I never had the time. When you are supporting 3 households, every minute is billable. But now my weekends were my own. My bank account was growing untethered from the anchor of Ashley's lifestyle. I patted the dirt down around the plant. It was quiet here. A hawk circled overhead, its cry lonely and piercing. For a long time I had been afraid of this silence. I had filled it with the noise of other people's problems because I was terrified that if I stopped fixing things I would have no purpose. I thought being the provider was my identity. I was wrong. Being at peace was my identity. My phone resting on a flat stone nearby began to buzz. It was a blocked number. I knew who it was. She called once a week from different burner phones or friends' numbers, always trying to find a crack in the wall. I wiped the dirt from my hands and picked it up. Hello? Jess, don't hang up. Her voice was thin, desperate. It's me. Please. I'm staying on a friend's couch. I can't do this anymore. I just need a little help. Just a deposit for a studio. I promise I'll pay you back. I looked at the garden. The rows of new life struggling but standing upright in the sun. It means everything I said softly. It means I love you enough to let you save yourself. Jess, please, I have nothing. You have the consequences of your actions, Ashley. That's the only thing that's truly yours, and it's the only thing that will teach you how to live. You're a monster, she screamed, the old entitlement flaring up like a dying ember. I'll come up there, I'll make you listen. Call the police, then I said. I ended the call. I blocked the number. I picked up my trowel and went back to the earth. I was planting hydrangeas. They take time to bloom and they need acidic soil, but when they finally flower, they are magnificent. You have to weed the garden to let the flowers grow. You have to cut away the rot to save the tree. It wasn't revenge, it was landscaping, and for the first time in my life, the view was beautiful. Sometimes you have to be the villain in their story to be the hero in yours. If you've ever had to make that hard choice, share this story. You're not alone.